I think the world is moving towards this identity-based authentication. Usually you kind of see it on the password side first with like logging into Facebook or Netflix. You now have this thing called passkey that you can use. And that's identity-based authentication in a nutshell. And whatever happens to passwords eventually happens to secrets. It just takes a much longer time horizon. But I think that's where we're going to, is eventually, instead of having a secret, you'll have an identity connection.
You are listening to The Secure Developer, where we speak to industry leaders and experts about the past, present, and future of DevSecOps and AI security. We aim to help you bring developers and security together to build secure applications while moving fast and having fun. This podcast is brought to you by Snyk. Snyk's developer security platform helps developers build secure applications without slowing down. Snyk makes it easy to find and fix vulnerabilities in code, open source dependencies, containers, and infrastructure as code, all while providing actionable security insights and administration capabilities. To learn more, visit snyk.io/TSD.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Secure Developer. My name is Danny Allen and I'm joined today by Brian Vallelunga, founder and CEO at Doppler. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you on, Brian. And the reason for that is this is actually my first show as CTO of Snyk Security. And it's a really important topic that we're going to dig in today, which is secrets management. So I thought maybe you could just introduce yourself to the audience and share something about the inception or beginning of the Doppler technology and company.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Brian, one of the founders and CEO, and Doppler is a secrets manager designed for developers and DevOps teams with the real goal of being the central source of truth for all your secrets across all your teams, projects, and infrastructure. You can kind of think about it as like GitHub for secrets. And before we kind of like jump too much into it, I think it's first probably worth sharing a little bit about what are secrets so people know what they're being told to care about in a way. So secrets are highly sensitive pieces of data. They're typically API keys. So if you're using Snyk or Stripe or Twilio, you're given an API key as a developer and or database URLs or certificates, anything generally super sensitive. Also, we kind of think of configuration as well. So if you have like a port variable or a logging statement or a feature flag, that's typically all bundled under secrets. And so you can kind of think about it as like every application has three parts usually. They have code, compute, and secrets. And there's been a lot of great tools for code and compute, but not really much for secrets. And that's where Doppler steps in and is trying to be that GitHub for secrets. And a little background about how we got started, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Love to hear that.
So Doppler has a pretty unique founding story, I think. It actually started out nothing to do with secrets at all. It started out as a crypto machine learning marketplace, kind of all the buzzwords in one. And this is very much one of those projects where it felt like pushing a boulder up a hill. You move like 1 foot forward and slip 5 feet back from exhaustion. And at some point, I was working on this crypto machine learning marketplace while I was at Uber. So I'd work at Uber during the day and I'd work on Doppler at night. And at some point, I'm just like 8 months in, deeply frustrated. Nothing's working from a product go-to-market perspective. And so I decided to take a trip to Mexico and with the goal of just taking a break from it all and relaxing and resetting. And the first day there, I just realized that I'm not going to be able to do that. I keep thinking about the business and I realize that it's not going to work no matter what I try. It's just like I'm either not the right founder or it's just too early as a business. And so I start looking at all the problems I was facing while running this. And managing environment variables and secrets and API keys just was a theme that just kept popping up again and again and again. And I've always been inspired by other founders. And I think Stuart Butterfield from Slack is like probably one of the best in the industry. I would say of like failing upwards, right? He creates a video game and that video game fails, but out of that was born Flickr, which becomes a big success. And then he goes again and he tries to create a video game and that ultimately ends up failing, but born out of that was Slack. And so I was like, okay, can we do the same thing with Doppler, the crypto machine learning marketplace? And secrets was just like this problem that I kept feeling and facing again and again and again, and all these like weird, interesting ways. It wasn't just like one problem, it was a bunch of problems. Two that really come to mind. We had a contractor and it felt really weird at some point to give them all the crypto keys. And then at some point when we became just a machine learning marketplace and dropped the crypto, we were using Stripe and it felt weird to give them the Stripe API key, right? You give them this production API key and then they hold on to it forever. Even if you like let that contractor go, they still have access to that key unless you rotate it. And that just felt very scary to me for them to have access to all that data. The other was we accidentally put the Stripe production key in staging and the staging went to prod. And we didn't know that that's why we weren't doing transactions for like a month. We just thought the business was failing. And so there was a lot of issues like that that really came to mind when I was thinking about this. And so I come back from Mexico and I go to this dinner that Stripe was hosting. And it was the Stripe Atlas dinners where they'd take 50 founders and developers and they'd put them all in a room, give them some pizza, and they'd say, talk. And I just asked the room, hey, am I a shitty engineer or is the world broken? I can't tell anymore. Like, is secrets a real problem? And about 50, 60% of them said that they were having problems managing secrets. And one woman in particular came up to me and said, this was a Wednesday, and she's like, I've had 3 outages this week. Have me a solution by Sunday. And I was like, no, 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 no. We cannot. That's not possible. And she goes, I don't give a fuck. Have it by Sunday. And I was like, okay, it's a real pain point. There's something here. And so I started talking to other companies, small, big, and it just seemed like everyone was struggling. And the universal theme across all of it was that individual developers didn't really have much outside of a .env file, which has a lot of problems on its own and insecure.
Hmm.
And then big enterprises would either build their own tools, and that would be built for a moment in time, and it wouldn't scale past that, or they were buying HashiCorp Vault, which was not really made for that use case. And it was really made for a completely different use case and built for security, not built for the everyday developer. And so these security teams would buy it, force the DevOps team to install it, and then developers would basically run away from it. They would run from it like the plague. I kind of joke that a lot of our angel investors invested because they bought Vault and paid the price. And so we believed that we could build something for developers from the get-go that had all the developer workflows that they wanted, because that's super important in building a good solution. And that's kind of how we got started and how we learned about the pain point by facing it ourselves.
And so there's a lot to touch on there or to unpack, but was this your first go around at founding a company? It wasn't, was it? You'd founded some companies prior to this?
Yeah, so I would say Doppler is like the first successful company. There were 7 other companies in the past, and all of them, I guess, feel like projects now compared to like the scale of Doppler. But yeah, there was a lot of bumps along the way, and I just always believed that you just needed one good business to make it all worth it. And so learn why you failed, think about it, take a little break, and then get back in the game again.
Well, I love the founding story because it gives you a good perspective on the challenge or the magnitude of the problem that we're trying to solve. I remember back writing applications early in my career, and you would hard code actually the database usernames and passwords, and then you'd have to remember to scrub them out before you published it or shared it out to people. And we've come a long way since then. But as you say, someone leaves a company today, the way that we handle those secrets is a major challenge. So I guess I'm curious from a best practices perspective. Obviously, we've come a long way since hard coding passwords and things and secrets into our applications. What are the best practices, even outside of Doppler technologies? When people ask you, what are the top 3 things that I can do? What do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll try to keep these completely outside of Doppler just because I don't want it to be a whole session on pitching the product. So I think the first thing you need is you need really good storage. And to me, good storage means that it's encrypted, right? Because you don't want your
Hmm.
encrypted. So there's a lot of good cloud providers that can provide that, AWS Secrets Manager or Parameter Store, GCP, and so on. Almost every major like PaaS provider as well, like Vercel platform, has a secrets manager in it. The second thing, and this is super important, is that it needs to work in all of your workflows, right? If you're copying and pasting secrets around, inevitably you're going from a secure place to an insecure place back to a secure place. And on top of that, your code requires these secrets, and that code is being automated into like deployments, right? But if your secrets are being manually copy and pasted, you're guaranteed going to have a race condition and then thus an outage, or break people's productivity when they're developing because they pull the latest copy of code and all of a sudden the secrets aren't there, and now they have a broken build, and they have to go figure out why and who has that secret that they should have. So that's number 2, is make sure it's kind of like built into the workflows. And then 3, I think, is also super important, is that developers need to like using it. Like, I don't know of a better way of saying that than this, but like I have found that if you build tools even that fit into the workflows that are secure, if it doesn't have the right developer experience, which is arguably a very like qualitative thing to evaluate, it's very hard to like have a quantitative opinion on this. But if it feels right, like it just feels right in that DX experience, developers are going to run towards it, because a good DX is a productivity tool, right? It makes them more productive the more they use it. And if you don't have that last part, then developers are going to always work around it, and you'll never get the underlying security benefits that the company needs or the project needs.
And so you were given a half a week to come up with a minimum viable product or capability that was simple. I'm being a bit facetious, of course. How long did it actually take to get something that was easy for developers? Because I have to imagine, I mean, I'm just thinking of the Sneak workflows that we have here. We have all kinds of different pipelines and streams of activity and different ecosystems in which we interact. How do you cover them all, and how do you make it easy for developers to do secrets management in all these different varying pipelines with different outcomes behind them?
It took a long time, way longer than I thought. I think we rebuilt the product 3 times, at least from the implementation side from scratch. So the first thing to note is that every developer thinks that the way they do things is pretty common, but the reality is it's actually not. They're, I would say, like 70% close to like most other developers when you start cohorting them. And so you start to see like these big trends that pop up. And as long as you can adhere to those big trends, you're good. So in our case, we realized that developers in local development want a command line interface that allows them to fetch their secrets and inject into their application. So they can use it as environment variables in development and in production. You don't need to have this thing where you're reading from a file in development and production, you're reading from the environment. So we built a CLI, and the CLI automatically restarts whenever secrets change. So if your buddy changes secrets for the same project that you're on, you automatically get those secrets and it'll restart the application. Then when you kind of move into higher order forms of environments like CI/CD, staging, and production, we found that most customers either want 2 implementation paths. They want it integrated into their infrastructure directly. So write it into AWS Secrets Manager, write it into Parameter Store, or Vercel, or Nullify, or any of these other cloud providers. And largely they want that because that's what they're already doing today. And it doesn't change the SLA requirement. If you add Doppler into the hot path of your application being up, now you've changed the SLA. We don't want to be part of that hot path either. We just want to make sure that you always have the right secrets at the right time. That was the next big learning for us was like, okay, we need real native integrations that are super easy to set up. You one click and you're done. You never have to think about it again. It runs behind the scenes. When a secret changes in Doppler, it'll change in your infrastructure and restart those application deployments. And then the last one was Kubernetes. And there's a whole host of companies, especially the larger enterprises, that are running on these extremely massive Kubernetes deployments. And they wanted a native integration into Kubernetes. So instead of reading from AWS Secrets Manager to Kubernetes secrets to their application, it would be Doppler has a Kubernetes operator that then writes into Kubernetes secrets and restarts their applications with whatever rollout strategy they've already defined. And that kind of integration across the board was good enough just as like a green light, like just to get the ball rolling. But then you have to take it up a notch because it unlocks the ability for you to use secrets, but not complete the developer experience. Developers at the end of the day don't want to leave their editor. They don't want to leave VS Code. And so we built a VS Code extension where you can edit your secrets side by side with your code. And it's two-way sync and it's secure, so it doesn't write to the file system and all that, but it behaves like a file, behaves like a YAML file, but it actually isn't a file. It's something else entirely. And that was really key because then developers never have to leave their editor. And that's kind of like how we completed this, I guess you could say, this ecosystem for strong DX is that you don't have to leave your editor. When you change those secrets, it then replicates to every other developer on that team who has the right access controls and restarts their applications. When you are ready to push it into higher forms of environments, you can open up a pull request in Doppler and then save it. And then that will automatically write into your infrastructure and restart those deployments. And that was kind of like an end-to-end lifecycle way of thinking and approaching secrets that just hadn't been done until now.
You see that as changing in the future. So IDE is obviously where the developers live in whatever IntelliJ VS Code you mentioned. As we see the emergence of Backstage and Roadie and IDPs, do you think that where you interact and manage with the secrets are going to change over time? Or no, you think the IDE is still going to be the primary interaction point?
It's a good question. I think it really depends on how far in the future we're talking. I think the world is moving towards this identity-based authentication. Usually you kind of see it on the password side first with like logging into Facebook or Netflix, you now have this thing called passkey that you can use. And that's identity-based authentication in a nutshell. And whatever happens to passwords eventually happens to secrets. It just takes a much longer time horizon. But I think that's where we're going to, is eventually, instead of having a secret, you'll have an identity connection. For example, a customer could have an identity connection with Doppler and Stripe, and just the fact that you're logged into Doppler and you're using the Doppler CLI or the Doppler operator, you'll automatically be authenticating in Stripe. And there's no API key that needs to be managed or rolled or anything like that. And I think that's where we're going long term. And in a world like that, developers are now thinking in like checklists, right? They're like, okay, I need Stripe, enable Stripe. Automatically, it's provisioned, it's set up, and you have all the authentication you need, and you don't need to worry about an API key. So that's my
Well,
hot
I've
take
heard
on
it.
where it's going.
Yeah, I've heard it said that identity is going to be the perimeter of the artificial intelligence world. And it is true that it seems to be consolidating down around identity and by extension of that, secrets. So we were supposed to solve all this a while ago with secrets rotation. I mean, orchestrate secrets rotation. Why has that not worked, or is it working?
I think it works in a specific set of use cases, but doesn't cover the whole landscape, which is actually the root problem. So every major cloud provider, AWS, GCP, Azure, all support secrets rotation for their database products. They don't support it for pretty much any other product, but they support it for at least databases. And that's exactly the problem that we're facing is like there's a very specific set of providers that actually allow for secrets rotation. And for anyone in the room who doesn't know what secrets rotation is, it's the idea of issuing a new credential and revoking the old one on a cadence. So let's just say every 30 days, we swap out the lock and key on the door. And that's what we're trying to do with API keys. And the idea there is if some bad actor or good actor walks away with these keys, they're only valid for 30 days or whatever time period you set. And really, the underlying problem with secret rotation is very, very few providers actually support it. I would say outside of databases, all the other major concentrations of risk, like Stripe, for example, which is like payments, right? Access to credit cards and bank accounts, does not support it. And they need to. And it needs to be a full industry wide movement to support it. Now, to support it is actually not that hard. It really doesn't take that much change from each provider. All they need to be able to do is have two capabilities. They need to be able to have API endpoints that allow us to create, delete, and check a credential. And they need to be able to support two keys at a time, two API keys at a time. And the reason why you need two is because you don't want to bring down production, right? You revoke one and you issue a new one in that time period, you now have caused an outage. And that's very simple. And there's some great companies like MongoDB Atlas that are supporting this. Twilio supports this. There are more and more companies starting to support this. We just need a bigger effort industry wide. Providers like Doppler and other secrets managers can provide this seamless secrets rotation experience across the board.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. And one of the challenges that we have as an organization is getting that industry alignment on how to do those things. And I've seen industry alignment work in the past, specifically in the payment card industry with data security standard, where you had these requirements like this is the way that you handle credit cards. You do A, B, and C. Do we need something similar in the secrets world, whether it be PCI DSS enforcing it or a SOC 2 certification? Do you support that regulatory approach to helping lock down the secrets that organizations are using?
Absolutely. Absolutely. From two perspectives. One, from the perspective we just talked about of providers being able to provide the necessary things so that secrets management companies like Doppler or any other can provide the functionality like rotation. And so the only way that's going to happen is if there's a compliance requirement there. Especially the compliance requirement will be great at standardizing so that we don't have to build 20 or 30 different implementations of the same thing. But I think the most important part is not that. It's on the end company. Like every company, in my personal belief, has a responsibility to its customers to keep their data secure, to keep their private data private. And you can only really do that if you're securing the keys to the digital kingdom, right? If you say, hey, here's this door, and behind this door is all the data, and we're not going to protect it, you can't really make a strong argument you're protecting the data. And SOC 2 is great at setting table stakes level of security that you need to set as a company. But one big gap it has is secrets management. It just doesn't talk about it at all. And I think there needs to be serious controls in place. Controls are a way of evaluating an individual thing in SOC 2. But basically, SOC 2 needs to encompass secrets management so that every company manages their secrets securely. Without that, you have to play this very large awareness game of getting every company to care. And secrets management is one of those things that keeps the lights on. Like the best case scenario is you don't get hacked and your developers stay productive. So it's kind of hard to make that argument at a mass scale when there isn't a compliance requirement. Just like if we didn't have a bunch of other things in SOC 2, like make sure you have secure hosting or secure code, those probably wouldn't be industry standards as well. And so I think SOC 2 has a strong requirement or should have a strong requirement around secrets management.
Do you think you can get that alignment within the industry? I guess would be my first question. And secondly, should it be published? Like I've always heard that you're putting a target on your back as soon as you say, I am doing X. So if you were to highlight, hey, I'm doing secrets management, do you think that's an advantage, a good thing, a bad thing? How do you see it going forward?
Do you think it's possible to rally the industry around to get SOC 2 at secrets management included into SOC 2? I think it is possible, but I think it's a very long-term play. Everything that I've learned about how SOC 2 changes, it's a very slow thing. and
Yes.
requires quite a lot of navigation. Now, I think this is where companies like Sneak and Doppler and other security focused companies can join together and build a big megaphone that says, we believe as an industry this should happen. Now, there are real reasons why this should happen outside of us as a secrets management company being incentivized to encourage this. For example, there are more hacks than ever before. Those attacks are attacking big companies and small companies. And so we think that cyber attacks are going to become more and more frequent. And if you have one single piece of text that unlocks the entire holy grail of data, attackers are strongly incentivized to go after it. And so you absolutely have to protect this. I don't care if you use Doppler or not. I need the industry to care about doing something. Every time a major data breach happens, the customers are the ones that are really affected by this, right? Think about what would happen if like Uber got hacked and every trip I'd ever taken or you'd taken was now out public. Your home, your family's, every restaurant you've been to, every place you shouldn't have been to that you have been to, like whatever it may be, all that data is now available and probably getting sold and being manipulated.
Well, we certainly live in a world where our digital lives are online, and I would agree with you. I mean, this is why you and I are in the industry, to secure applications and secrets and all of this. Where do you think it's going? Do you think that we'll be dealing with secrets 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or do you think that's just going to be automated into the engines? Like, how do you see the industry evolving forward? I know that historically secrets were these hard-coded texts, and obviously it's changed from there. Where does it go 5, 10 years from now?
It's a good question. I think there's one thing that's going to impact it tremendously, and that is AI. We're starting to see this now, or the early days of this, where you have like GitHub Copilot, right? And GitHub Copilot's supposed to be like a really good, was it paired programmer with you. But we're starting to see evolutions past that, like AI agents that will be completely responsible for writing the entire code base. You can look at Devin or magic.dev, and there's a couple others out there that are aiming at this goal. And they're not there today, but they will be maybe 5 years from now. And so really the question is, what does secrets look like or identity authentication look like in a world where AI is writing some big portion of the code base, or at least across the industry, right? So maybe it's like some companies choose to have AI agents writing the code, others don't. And I think what we're going to end up seeing is probably a very standardized protocol around identity-based authentication, and it's going to be end to end. So if you're in AWS, for example, you're now automatically authenticated to Stripe because there's some intermediary like Doppler or other secrets manager that's facilitating that identity-based authentication. So you're in AWS and Doppler knows that you're now authenticated. And then because Doppler and Stripe have a connection, you're now authenticated to Stripe. So by being in an AWS box, you're now authenticated to Stripe. And I think all of that is going to be dynamically provisioned on the fly, all of these identities with AI. So AI will say, hey, we have this product goal or go to market goal that we're trying to accomplish. They'll build up all the relevant infrastructure. When they're standing up that infrastructure, they'll be standing up the identities and the connections between AWS Doppler, or swap out a secrets manager from Doppler and then whatever underlying third-party service you're using, Stripe, Twilio, and so on. And that's the world I'd imagine we're moving towards.
Yeah, and I think this is why they say the perimeter of artificial intelligence AI is on the identity, because it'll be smart enough to swap the data and the identity and the authentication authorization protocols between these different worlds. It is true that AI is changing every single industry. In fact, I can't get through a podcast these days without AI coming up. So one of the questions that we like to end with on the Secure Developer actually is around AI specifically. If you could take AI to automate any part of your day-to-day life or work experience, what would it be? I mean, we're in a new environment now where we can leverage it to create emails or manage secrets or identity. How would you use AI? Dream world.
There's one thing I really want out of AI, and that's not generative text or images. It's the ability to solve hard problems. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're moving in that direction. Like, if we had an AI agent that was able to solve any arbitrarily hard problem, right? So that could be calculus, like some math equation, or it could be just like, hey, my business is failing in this area. Help me understand that. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter the domain. It can go become a domain expert either through public data or private data. That'd be incredibly powerful, because not only do I think I need this, but I think humanity needs this, right? Like, go solve cancer in its entirety. Like, I'd love to put an AI behind that, or go solve faster than light travel, right? And be able to test things in the real world, but also simulate them and be able to know when to test in a virtual world and when to test in a physical world. Like, I think that is actually something humanity needs the most. And it can bubble up to the biggest of scale, like solve light speed travel, and as small as to like help a CEO make his business a little bit better. If I could choose one thing to build, that's what it'd be.
Well, they say we always overestimate how things will change in the next 2 years and underestimate in 10 years. And I think that's definitely true with AI, that right now it's being used for natural language learning and it's being used for image generation and it's helping me summarize things. But I don't think that any of us really fully understand 10 years from now how it's going to be used to help us focus on solving cancer or whatever the challenge happens to be. It definitely is a exciting time to be in the technology space. Well, Brian, it's been fantastic to have you on the podcast. Thank you for your time and sharing your insights around secrets. It's a big motivation and driver for us here at Sneak and all of our customers. And so I appreciate your time and look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for everyone who's made it to the very end for listening this far, and I hope it helped.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope to hear you and see you the next time on the next episode of The Secure Developer. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to The Secure Developer, brought to you by Sneak. We hope this episode gave you new insights and strategies to help you champion security in your organization. If you like these conversations, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share the episode with fellow security leaders who might benefit from our discussions. We'd love to hear your recommendations for future guests, topics, or any feedback you might have to help us get better. Please contact us by connecting with us on LinkedIn under our Sneak account, or by emailing us at thesecuredev@sneak.io. That's it for now. I hope you join us for the next one.